Some stories don't start with love. They start with silence, with two people sharing the same space and hiding everything they feel. This is one of those stories.
I never expected anyone to walk in that night. It was already past midnight, the kind of hour where the hostel felt forgotten by time itself. The hallway lights outside our room glowed dimly, humming with a tired persistence, and the air carried that hollow stillness that only existed when most of the building was asleep. Arian wasn't supposed to be back yet. He rarely was. Most nights after football practice, he disappeared into a world that seemed to orbit around him naturally. Teammates, laughter, plans that formed without effort. He never explained where he went, and I never asked. That quiet was my refuge. When he wasn't around, the room felt like it belonged to me, like I could finally breathe without measuring myself against someone who moved through life so easily. He wasn't unkind or arrogant, just effortlessly confident in a way I had never learned to be. That night, I had just finished showering. Steam lingered faintly in the air, fogging the mirror, the scent of soap still clinging to my skin. A towel was wrapped loosely around my waist as I crossed the room toward my wardrobe, unhurried, lost in thought. I should have moved faster. I should have pulled on clothes immediately, but I wasn't expecting anyone. The door burst open. Arian's voice cut through the quiet mid-sentence, then stopped completely. Time seemed to freeze. I stood there with my fingers clutching the edge of a t-shirt, my mind going blank in a way that felt almost deliberate. Arian stood just inside the doorway. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air felt heavier, warmer, charged with something I couldn't name. His eyes flicked downward briefly, not long enough to be obvious, but long enough for me to notice, long enough for my chest to tighten. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Then he blinked, like someone snapping awake. He turned away quickly, rubbing a hand through his hair, his movements suddenly rushed. He apologized, his voice uneven, said he should have knocked. I swallowed, forced a weak laugh, and pulled the t-shirt over my head, pretending the moment hadn't shifted something. He echoed my words a beat too late, then stepped back into the hallway and closed the door softly behind him. When he was gone, I realized I had been holding my breath. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't understand why. It should have been nothing, just an awkward mistake between roommates. But the room felt different now, like something invisible had moved and refused to settle back into place. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the hostel, my thoughts circling back to the way he had stopped mid-sentence, the way his voice had changed, the silence that had followed. I told myself I was overthinking it, yet my body wouldn't relax. Morning arrived softly, pale light filtering through the curtains. When I sat up, I realized Arian was already awake, leaning against his bed with his phone in hand, dressed for class. That alone felt strange. He was rarely up this early. When my gaze met his, he looked away too quickly, like he had been waiting for me to wake. He greeted me casually, but something about his tone felt forced. I responded, expecting him to leave, to let the day reset itself, but he stayed where he was. I commented on how early he was up, and he admitted he hadn't slept well. There was a pause before he mentioned the night before, and I cut him off too quickly, insisting it was fine, just bad timing. He laughed softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. I stood up, suddenly aware of how close we were in the small room, and that's when his hand closed gently around my wrist. The touch wasn't rough, just enough to stop me. When I looked up, his expression was different, hesitant, uncertain, almost vulnerable. He asked if we were good, and I knew he wasn't just talking about last night. I nodded and said yes.
For a moment, it looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he released my wrist, stepped back, and forced a light tone before grabbing his bag and leaving. The door closed quietly behind me, and I stood there with my heart racing, trying to understand why a single touch had unsettled me so deeply.
After that morning, nothing truly went back to normal, even though we both pretended it had. On the surface, everything looked the same. We still shared the room, followed our routines, lived parallel lives that only brushed against each other when necessary. But beneath that, something had shifted, subtle yet impossible to ignore. Arian started lingering. At first it was small things, almost unnoticeable. He stayed in the room longer than usual instead of leaving immediately after practice. He sat on his bed scrolling through his phone while I studied, asking casual questions about my classes even though he had never cared before. When he came back late, he offered me half of whatever snack he'd brought with him, acting like it was nothing, like he wasn't testing the space between us. His tone was easy, relaxed, but I could sense the effort behind it, like he was carefully choosing each word. Then there were the glances, quick and fleeting, but real. I caught them more than once, the way his eyes would drift toward me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, the way he looked away just a little too fast when our gazes met. His body seemed more aware of mine, tensing whenever I moved too close, as if proximity itself had become something charged. The touches started accidentally, or at least that's what I told myself. Our hands brushed when we reached for the same thing. His shoulder bumped mine as he passed behind me in the cramped space. Our knees touched amid the desk when we ate together. None of it should have mattered, yet every time it happened, my skin felt warm, like the contact lingered long after it ended. I told myself it was coincidence, that I was reading too much into ordinary moments, but my heart didn't listen. One night, the tension broke just enough to reveal itself. I was sitting at my desk, typing for hours, my back stiff and my eyes aching. Arian lay on his bed, tossing a small rubber ball into the air and catching it with lazy precision. He told me I should take a break. I brushed him off, saying I was almost done, even though I'd been saying that for hours. He rolled onto his side and teased me for working too hard, his voice light, familiar. When I joked back, he smirked, and the sight of it stirred something in me that made me uncomfortable with how natural it felt. Then, casually, as if it hadn't been building in his chest for days, he suggested we hang out sometime outside the room. The suggestion caught me off guard. We already spent time together, I pointed out. But he shook his head, saying this was different, that he meant actually hanging out by choice. There was something guarded in his expression, like he was bracing himself for rejection. I didn't agree, but I didn't say no either, and somehow that was enough. It started slowly. We grabbed dinner together when neither of us felt like cooking. We walked back to the hostel side by side, our steps falling into an easy rhythm. We stayed up late, talking about things we'd never discussed before, about classes, childhood memories, small frustrations we usually kept to ourselves. The more time we spent together, the more natural it felt, like this version of us had always been waiting beneath the surface. One evening after practice, Arian came back exhausted and collapsed onto his bed with a groan, complaining dramatically about his coach. I teased him, and he laughed before asking, half-jokingly, for a shoulder massage. I hesitated, aware of how easily this could cross into something dangerous, but his expectant look pulled me forward. I sat on the edge of his bed and placed my hands on his shoulders, pressing gently. He relaxed under my touch, letting out a quiet sound that made my stomach twist. His warmth, the solid weight of him beneath my hands, made it difficult to focus on anything else. I told myself to keep it casual, to stop before it meant more than it should, but part of me didn't want to. That was when I realized
I liked the tension, liked the way it hovered between us, unresolved and alive. The weeks that followed only deepened it. We were no longer just roommates sharing space. We were orbiting each other, drawn together by something neither of us named. The glances lasted longer. The touches felt less accidental. Every interaction carried an undercurrent of unspoken meaning, like we were both aware of a line and deliberately choosing to walk just beside it without crossing. I tried to tell myself it would fade, that eventually things would settle back into normal, but deep down I knew that wasn't true. Something had already changed, and whatever it was still growing. I should have known the tension couldn't stay suspended forever. It had been building quietly for weeks, settling into every glance, every pause, every moment where we stood just a little too close without acknowledging why. Arian and I moved through our days in a careful balance, close but cautious, connected yet pretending we weren't circling something dangerous. Then came the night that tipped everything. It was a Friday, and Arian insisted I come with him to a small gathering in another dorm. He said it casually, like it was no big deal, nudging me with that easy confidence of his, telling me I spent too much time cooped up in the room. I didn't want to go. Crowded spaces drained me, and I already felt like I didn't belong in his world. But something about the way he asked made it hard to say no. Maybe I wanted to see how he existed outside our shared space. Maybe I wanted to feel included. The gathering was exactly what I expected. Dim lights, loud music, people packed together in clusters, laughter spilling over itself. Arian fit in effortlessly, moving from group to group, talking, smiling, drawing attention without trying. I stayed near the edges, holding a drink I barely touched, watching him from a distance. Every now and then, his gaze found mine across the room, lingering just long enough to make my chest tighten before he turned back to the conversation in front of him. Then I saw her.
A girl, laughing too loudly at something he said, standing too close, resting her hand on his arm like it belonged there. He didn't pull away. Why would he? That was normal. That was expected. Still, something twisted painfully inside me, sharp and unexpected. I felt foolish for caring, foolish for imagining that whatever existed between us was anything more than something I had built in my own head. Without thinking, I turned and left. I didn't tell him. I didn't look back. By the time I reached our room, my thoughts were tangled and heavy, my chest tight with emotions I didn't want to name. I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop without really seeing it, trying to convince myself that I had imagined everything, that his lingering looks and careful touches hadn't meant anything, that I was projecting feelings onto moments that were never meant to carry that weight. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn, but I knew it was him. He asked what happened, his voice sharper than usual, edged with confusion. I shrugged, pretending to be unfazed, telling him I just didn't feel like staying. He stepped further into the room, said I could have told him instead of disappearing. I said I didn't think he'd notice, that he seemed busy. The silence that followed felt heavy. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, asking if that was really what this was about. I snapped my laptop shut, telling him to forget it, but he didn't let it go. He told me to talk to me, his tone firm, almost desperate. When I finally turned to face him, his expression startled me. The confidence was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. I admitted that I didn't know what we were doing, that I didn't know what he wanted from me, that I didn't understand why things felt the way they did between us. I stopped myself before saying too much, before letting the truth slip out completely. His jaw tightened. He took a step closer, his hands trembling slightly at his sides, and quietly admitted that he felt it too.
My heart pounded. I asked him what that meant, and he shook his head, running a hand through his hair, saying he didn't know. And that was the problem, because I did. The days after that were strange and careful. Not tense, but cautious, like we were both standing at the edge of something we didn't know how to step into. We didn't bring up the party again. We didn't talk about what had almost been said. Instead, we stayed close, closer than before, but avoided crossing the line we both felt. It was exhausting, pretending nothing had changed when everything had. Until one quiet evening, when the hostel was unusually still and the air between us felt too heavy to ignore. We sat on our beds, laptops open, pretending to work, until Aryan finally sighed and shut his. He said he couldn't do this anymore, couldn't keep acting like nothing had changed. I asked what he meant, even though I knew. He gestured between us, frustration slipping into his voice, accusing me of avoiding him. I denied it at first, but he interrupted, admitting that he was just as lost, that he didn't know how to handle what was happening to him. I asked why he was still here, why he kept coming back to this room, to me. His answer was quiet and honest. He said he didn't want to be anywhere else. My breath caught. He stepped closer, closing the distance between us, and I didn't move away. I could see the conflict written all over his face, the way he clenched his jaw like he was fighting himself. He admitted he hated not understanding what he was feeling, hated being unsure of himself. Something in me softened at the sound of his voice, at how vulnerable he looked. I told him he didn't have to have everything figured out right now. I told him he already knew what I wanted. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his hand lifted, slow and hesitant, his fingers brushing mine. The contact was brief, but it sent a rush through me that left me breathless. He didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. For the first time, there were no denials, no pretending, just the truth, quietly acknowledged.
He didn't kiss me that night. Instead, he let his fingers linger before whispering that he needed time. I understood. Some feelings take courage to face, especially when they lead into unfamiliar territory. After that, the uncertainty faded into something warmer, steadier. We didn't label what we were becoming, but we didn't need to. The tension shifted, no longer sharp with confusion, but slow and glowing, like something being carefully protected. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of where it might lead. After that night, nothing needed to be said out loud for a while. The truth had settled between us quietly, no longer something we were running from, but something we were learning how to carry. The days that followed felt different, lighter in a way I hadn't expected. Aryan didn't pull away, and neither did I. Instead, he moved closer in subtle ways, choosing the seat beside me instead of across the room, brushing my arm when he passed, letting silence stretch comfortably between us. His laughter softened when it was just the two of us, his voice losing the performative edge it carried around others. We still didn't define what we were, but we didn't deny it either. Whatever had started between us was no longer fragile, no longer threatening to break at the slightest touch. It felt steady, like something being carefully built instead of accidentally discovered. One evening, we ended up on the hostel rooftop, the city spread out below us in a quiet sprawl of lights and distant movement. The air was cool, carrying the hum of traffic and the quiet conversations of people living their lives far below. Aryan leaned against the railing, unusually quiet, his shoulder brushing mine as if by instinct. For a long time, neither of us spoke.
When he finally did, his voice was low and thoughtful. He admitted that he had spent most of his life assuming certain things about himself, about who he was supposed to be and how he was supposed to feel.
He said he had tried to ignore what was happening between us at first, telling himself it didn't fit into the version of himself he understood. But seeing me pull away that night at the party had made something painfully clear. He told me he didn't want a world where I wasn't in it, not as a distant presence, not as someone he kept at arm's length. I listened, my heart pounding, letting his words settle in slowly. When I spoke, I told him I wasn't expecting certainty, that I wasn't asking him to have everything figured out. I just needed honesty and patience and the willingness to keep choosing each other one day at a time. He nodded, his expression calm in a way I hadn't seen before, like he had stopped fighting himself. When he reached for my hand, it wasn't hesitant this time. His fingers intertwined with mine naturally, as if they had always belonged there. We didn't rush anything. We stayed on the rooftop until the air grew colder, talking about small things and future possibilities without pressure or promises. Back in the room, life continued, but with a new rhythm. We studied together, shared meals, laughed more easily. The tension that had once made every moment feel uncertain transformed into something warm and grounding. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic turning points, just the quiet understanding that we were moving forward together. Over time, Aryan became more comfortable in himself, less guarded, more open. He didn't change overnight, neither did I, but we grew into whatever this was with care and intention. One night, as we sat side by side watching the city lights flicker through the window, he squeezed my hand gently and said he didn't know what the future would look like, but he knew he wanted me in it. I told him I wasn't going anywhere. And in that simple exchange, something settled permanently between us. Not certainty, not perfection, but choice. We chose to stay. We chose to try. And for the first time in my life, that felt like more than enough.
Some connections don't arrive loudly. They grow quietly, in shared silences and honest moments.